I never thought I'd be here, sitting in this room, facing an empty bed and a stack of my things, wondering how everything turned so sideways. This is how it ends, isn't it? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. It all started on a Tuesday, because doesn't it always? I was 28, living with my mom in the house I grew up in. I'd moved back in a year ago, trying to find my footing after a rough patch in life. It wasn't a huge deal. After all, she was my mom, and we'd always been close. She didn't mind, and frankly, I didn't either. It was a small, comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but enough to make you feel safe. And in my case, safe felt good. I was in the middle of a freelance project doing marketing work for a local startup when things started to unravel. It was supposed to be temporary just until I got on my feet again. Nothing permanent. Mom had her space and I had mine. We were adults, both doing our thing. We didn't always talk about the deep stuff, but I figured we had a good balance. But something shifted when Mom introduced me to her new friend, Linda. At first, I didn't think much of it. Linda was in her late 40s, full of energy, constantly talking about her trips to yoga classes and healthy eating. She was that type, always smiling, always moving. She had this quiet confidence, like everything she did was just a little bit better than anyone else's. She reminded me of the person I wished I could be, but wasn't. Maybe that's why I didn't click with her immediately. But Mom loved her, and that should have been enough for me to let her into our lives without questioning it. Then came the first strange moment. Linda invited herself to stay at our place for a weekend. I thought it was odd, but kept my mouth shut. After all, it wasn't like I was paying rent or anything. But Mom seemed genuinely excited. She was acting like they were best friends, and I wasn't about to throw a wrench in her happiness. It wasn't long before Linda started staying over more often. Weekends turned into weekdays, and soon she was practically living here, moving her stuff into the guest room, using our kitchen like it was her own. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being petty, but things started to feel off. Linda was everywhere. She'd leave her shoes by the front door, use my bathroom, and eat my snacks. I never said anything because it felt childish to complain, but I couldn't help but feel like I was losing my space. This was my mom's house, sure, but it felt like I was the intruder. It was during one of these moments that I overheard a conversation between Mom and Linda. I was on the stairs, trying to grab my charger from the kitchen, when I caught snippets of their conversation. "I think Katie would understand," Linda said, her voice low but not quiet enough for me to miss. "But I don't know. It feels like, well, it's complicated." That's when I started to feel the tension. What exactly was complicated? I wasn't sure, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I'd never heard that tone from Linda before. There was something behind it, something she wasn't telling me, and even though I tried to ignore it, that feeling lingered, growing heavier with each passing day. I should have confronted Mom right then, but I didn't. Instead, I pushed the feeling down, kept my head down, and tried to get through the days. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just jealous, or maybe I was being oversensitive. I kept going about my day, trying to block out the noise in my head. But as the weeks went on, things got weirder. I started finding strange little things around the house, notes left on the counter, unfamiliar books on the coffee table, new dishes in the sink. I asked Mom about them, but she would always shrug and say, "Linda's just been helping out, that's all." There was always an explanation, and I let it slide, convincing myself it was just a phase. But here's the thing. When your gut starts telling you something's off, you'd better listen. I wish I had. Because the day I did was the day everything came crashing down. It happened on a Friday afternoon. I just finished a conference call for work, the kind that leaves you drained but satisfied because you've wrapped up a big task. My mom had gone out to run some errands, so I was alone in the house. I'd made myself a quick lunch and was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails when I heard the familiar sound of the front door opening. "Mom, is that you?" I called out without looking up. But it wasn't Mom's voice that answered. It was Linda's. "Hey, Katie, it's just me, Linda." I couldn't help but cringe a little. I mean, I didn't dislike Linda, but she had this way of making herself feel too present. Like you couldn't just have a quiet moment without her filling up the space. I forced a smile and replied, "Oh, hey, Linda, what's up?" She popped her head around the kitchen door, her face bright. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. Hope that's okay?" I swallowed my irritation and nodded. Yeah, sure. Why not? She walked in without waiting for an invitation, carrying a bag of groceries. I thought I'd make us dinner tonight. Your mom loves my lasagna, you know. I thought we could have a little family night. I hadn't heard from Mom that she was planning to come home early, but I figured it was fine. Still, something about the way Linda was so comfortable in the space, it didn't sit right with me. I was about to say something when my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Hey honey, I'm staying at Linda's tonight. Hope that's okay. Don't wait up for me. Love you. I blinked at the screen. My mom hadn't even mentioned it to me before she left. Just a quick note, as though it were the most normal thing in the world for her to spend the night at Linda's. I felt this familiar pang of irritation, but I didn't want to cause a scene. I tried to mask the frustration with a forced smile. Looks like it's just you and me tonight, Linda, I said, my voice light but tight. Oh, that's perfect, she beamed, completely oblivious to the tension brewing inside me. We can finally get some quality time in, right? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked over to the fridge, grabbing a drink to calm my nerves. It was funny how she had this way of acting like everything was just fine. She'd waltz in, rearrange things, make herself at home, and I'd just be expected to go along with it. And I did. I always did. But that night, for the first time, I didn't want to. It wasn't about Linda being over. It wasn't about the lasagna. It was the fact that my mom wasn't even here, wasn't even giving me a heads up about her plans. And Linda, in her bright energy and constant presence, felt more like an intruder than a guest. We ate dinner in silence mostly. Linda talked about her yoga classes, her new diet, and her plans for the weekend while I nodded and picked at my food. I didn't want to be rude, but the more she talked, the more irritated I became. Everything she said felt like another reminder of how much she was in my space, how much she was in my life, whether I liked it or not. Finally, after dinner, Linda cleared the plates with a cheerful hum and went to the living room to put on a movie. I didn't want to sit there with her. I needed to be alone, to think, so I grabbed my things and headed for my room. But just as I was about to close the door, Linda called after me. Katie, I was thinking maybe we could do something fun tomorrow, like go to the farmer's market. I know how much your mom loves fresh produce, and it'd be nice to get some more bonding time, don't you think? Her voice was sweet, but something about the way she phrased it rubbed me the wrong way. Was she trying to force a connection? Maybe I was overthinking it, but it felt like she was trying to get in deeper, like she wanted to cement her place in our family. And for the first time, I realized that I wasn't sure I wanted that. I'm actually pretty busy tomorrow, I said, not quite meeting her eyes. Maybe some other time. Okay, no problem. But you know, I think your mom would really like it, she replied with a wink before turning her attention back to the TV. I closed the door behind me and let out a long, frustrated breath. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of my own thoughts. I should have just told her I wasn't comfortable, but I didn't. Instead, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, letting the silence of the room swallow me up. That night, I didn't sleep much. My mind raced with questions. What was really going on between Linda and my mom? Why was Linda so eager to insert herself into our lives? And why didn't Mom seem to care about how I felt? I couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something going on, and I needed to know what it was, because if I didn't, I would never be able to shake the feeling that something, or someone, was slowly creeping into my life, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. The feeling that something was off, that nagging sense in the pit of my stomach, was only getting stronger. So the next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to wait for Linda to tell me what was happening. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. Mom was still out with Linda, as usual. They'd gone to the farmer's market. Linda's idea, of course. I'd sent Mom a text earlier in the morning just to check in, but she hadn't replied yet. I wasn't surprised. It had been happening more often lately. She'd get caught up in her conversations with Linda, and before I knew it, hours would slip by without hearing from her. It stung a little, but I pushed the feeling down. I was pacing around the house trying to kill time when I noticed something odd in the hallway. a small black notebook lying on the floor near the entrance to the living room. It didn't belong to me. I bent down to pick it up, my curiosity piqued. As soon as I opened it, I knew I'd made a mistake. It was filled with pages of writing, small, neat handwriting that looked almost too perfect. My eyes scanned the pages quickly, but I froze when I saw the words, "Katie can never know the truth. It's better this way. She'd never understand." I swallowed hard. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. What was this? Why was Linda writing about me like that? And why did it feel like it was meant to be kept secret? My mind was racing. I flipped through the pages, my pulse quickening with each line I read. There were notes about me, about my mom, and even about some family events from years ago. It felt like I was reading something I wasn't supposed to see, a diary of some sort, full of half-truths and veiled thoughts. And there, in the middle of a page, was a sentence that made my stomach twist. "It's time. I need to make sure she stays in the dark about everything. The plan is almost complete." My hands were shaking. This wasn't just a random notebook. This was something deeper. I had no idea what the plan was, but it didn't sound good. I heard the sound of the front door opening just then, and I quickly shoved the notebook back into the drawer of the console table near the hallway, trying to act normal. My heart was pounding. It was too much all at once. I needed to think, to process, but I didn't have the luxury of time. Mom walked in, smiling as usual, followed by Linda, who was carrying a basket of fresh vegetables. "Hey, sweetie, we're back. Did you miss us?" Mom called out, oblivious to the storm I was trying to contain inside. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, I'm just doing some work." I didn't look directly at Linda. I couldn't. I was too rattled. "Oh, good. I thought maybe we could all have lunch together. I picked up some of those herbs you like from the market." Mom sounded happy, almost too happy, and that only made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. I couldn't bring myself to sit down with them. I needed space. "Actually, I've got a few things to do. I'll pass on lunch today," I said, backing away slowly. Mom frowned, but Linda piped up immediately, almost too eagerly. "Oh, come on, Katie, don't be like that. We're making your favorite. It'll only take a few minutes. Join us just for a bit?" I wanted to say no, I really did, but I couldn't bring myself to turn down her invitation, not without looking like a complete jerk. So, reluctantly, I nodded. "Fine, just for a bit." I sat down at the table with them, feeling more like a guest in my own home than ever before. The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Every time Linda spoke, I felt a little more on edge. But what was I supposed to do? Confront her now in front of Mom? I wasn't ready for that. I didn't even know what I was dealing with yet. Mom was chatting away, oblivious to the storm brewing between us. Linda smiled at me, a little too sweetly, as if she knew exactly what was going through my mind. I didn't trust her anymore. I couldn't. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I kept my distance as much as possible, retreating to my room to get some work done. But I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to that notebook, to the cryptic notes inside, to the idea that someone, was plotting behind my back. I needed answers, and I needed them fast, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might find. That night, after dinner, I decided to take the plunge. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. "Mom, can I talk to you about something?" I asked, my voice tight. I was sitting at the kitchen table again, trying to act casual, though I was anything but. "Of course, sweetie," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Is there something going on with Linda?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. I didn't even know how to phrase it, but I needed to know. Mom looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then decided to go for it. "I don't know. I just feel like she's kind of too involved in our lives, and it's been making me uncomfortable. She's here all the time, and it feels like I'm losing my space. And I heard her talking about me, Mom. I don't know what to think." My mom's face froze. She put her phone down slowly and stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Katie," she said quietly, finally breaking the silence. "But you have to understand, Linda's been a good friend to me, and I've been leaning on her a lot more lately." I swallowed hard, my heart sinking. "But why didn't you tell me any of this? Why has everything been happening behind my back?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's complicated, honey. Linda's helped me with a lot more than you know." I wanted to scream, to demand answers. but all I could do was sit there, helpless. The truth was out there, somewhere, but it was so much worse than I ever could have imagined. Linda was more than just a friend. She was involved, in ways I couldn't yet understand, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to find out just how deep it went. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept turning over the same thoughts: Linda's cryptic notebook, Mom's cryptic response, and the growing sense that everything around me was changing in ways I couldn't control. I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on, something I wasn't supposed to see but couldn't look away from. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing you had to jump but not quite ready to fall. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront Linda. I had to get the answers no matter how uncomfortable it would be. I wasn't going to let her or Mom keep me in the dark any longer. I was done playing the passive observer. I wasn't just going to sit back and watch my life unravel while they kept their secrets. I decided to stay home from work that day, pretending I had a stomach bug, just to avoid the awkwardness of being around them. It gave me the space to gather my thoughts, but the silence in the house was overwhelming. I couldn't ignore the tension hanging in the air, and when I heard the front door open around midday, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I was about to face it head on. Linda walked in like she always did, but this time, she wasn't her usual bubbly self. She was holding a shopping bag in her hand, but her eyes were scanning the house, almost like she was looking for something or someone. She spotted me sitting at the kitchen table, and her smile faltered for just a second. It was subtle, but I caught it. "Hey, Katie," she said, her voice sounding a little too casual, like she knew something was about to go down. "How are you feeling today? Still sick?" I gave her a tight smile. "I'm fine. Actually, we need to talk." She froze for a moment, the smile slipping from her face as she set the shopping bag down on the counter. I could feel the shift in the room, like she knew this was the moment everything was going to change. "What about?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light, but I could hear the nervous edge creeping in. "I know about the notebook," I said, voice steady, though my heart was hammering in my chest. "I know you've been keeping secrets from me, from both of us." Her eyes widened, but she recovered quickly, her usual calm demeanor slipping back into place. She gave a forced laugh, walking toward the counter. "Katie, I think you're overreacting. I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm not stupid, Linda," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I found your notebook. I saw what you wrote. About me, about Mom, about your plans." The words came out in a rush, like the floodgates had opened. "What is this, Linda? What's going on here? What aren't you telling me?" She went still, and for a moment I thought she might deny everything and try to brush it off. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, or maybe it was fear. Whatever it was, it made me realize I had just touched the surface of something much bigger than I could have imagined. "Look, Katie, this isn't how I wanted things to go," she said quietly, her voice losing its usual confidence. She ran a hand through her hair, sighing deeply. "I never wanted you to find out like this." I stared at her, waiting for her to continue, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed the truth, and I wasn't going to back down now. "Your mom has been struggling for a while," Linda began, her tone softer now, as though trying to justify her actions. "She's been depressed, more than you realize, and I've been helping her. I've been helping her get through things, but not just in the way you think. I've been helping her cope with some things from her past, some things she hasn't told you." My stomach dropped. I felt like the floor had just given way beneath me. What did she mean by coping? What was she talking about? "You have to understand," Linda continued, her voice almost pleading. "Your mom didn't want you to know this. She didn't want to hurt you, but she needed someone, and I've been there for her. I've been closer to her than you think." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. "Closer how?" She hesitated, as if weighing whether or not to tell me. Finally, she spoke in a low, almost resigned voice. "I'm in love with your mom, Katie, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but it's complicated. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want you to think that I was taking advantage of her. But it's more than just friendship. She's been leaning on me for more than emotional support." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. In an instant, everything I thought I knew about my mom and Linda, their friendship, their closeness, flipped upside down. Linda wasn't just a friend. She wasn't just some yoga-obsessed woman who'd happened to get close to my mom. She was in love with her, And my mom had been hiding that from me. She hadn't told me. I stood there in silence, my mind racing. The walls of my reality had just cracked wide open and I was staring into a chasm of confusion. But why didn't Mom tell me? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Why keep this from me? Linda looked down at her feet, her expression somber. She was afraid you wouldn't understand. Afraid you'd think she was wrong for feeling this way. She didn't want to burden you with it. Burden me? The words came out sharper than I intended. Mom is my family. Why wouldn't she think I could handle it? Linda looked at me with sad eyes, her voice softening. I know, Katie, but it's hard. She's always been so strong for you, always carried the weight of everything on her shoulders. She didn't want you to see her vulnerable. She didn't want you to think she was weak. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry. Not over this. Not over the fact that everything I'd believed about my mom and my life had just been shattered. I looked Linda square in the eye. So what now? What happens now? What do I do with this information? Linda took a step toward me, her eyes filled with regret. Katie, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. But this isn't just about me and your mom. It's about you too. You deserve to know the truth. You deserve to understand what's been going on. I shook my head, struggling to process it all. I don't know if I can handle this, I whispered. I don't know if I can trust either of you anymore. The weight of the truth hit me like a ton of bricks, and I suddenly felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. My mom, my rock, the person I'd trusted more than anyone, had been hiding something so big, something so personal from me for months. And Linda, she wasn't just a friend, she was something more. The room felt like it was closing in on me. The air grew thick with the heaviness of everything unsaid. And I realized, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that this wasn't just about Linda and my mom anymore. This was about me. This was about my own place in this mess, about figuring out how to make sense of the lies, the secrets, and the choices that had already been made for me. I stood there, frozen in a storm of emotions. The words Linda had just laid on me felt like a punch to the gut, and the more I thought about them, the heavier they became. My mind spun, and I could feel the walls of my life closing in. Everything I thought I knew about my mom, my home, even myself, it was all shaking apart at the seams. Linda was still standing there, her eyes searching mine for any sign of understanding. But how could I understand? How could I reconcile this new version of my life with the one I'd been living? How could I possibly absorb the fact that the person I trusted most in the world had been keeping secrets from me, secrets about her feelings and relationships that were far more complicated than I'd ever imagined? I need to be alone, I finally managed, my voice trembling but determined. Linda didn't protest. She simply nodded, her face showing a mixture of regret and sadness, but I didn't care anymore. I needed space. I needed time to process. So, without another word, I walked past her, up the stairs, and into my room, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed in the silence of the house, as if to punctuate the finality of everything. I collapsed onto my bed, staring at the ceiling, willing the confusion to stop. My mind felt like it was swirling, like a whirlpool threatening to suck me under. How could my mom, be in love with Linda? How could she keep something so huge from me, her own daughter? I didn't even know how to start unpacking everything. I thought about calling someone, maybe my best friend from college or my aunt, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I wasn't ready to share this with anyone yet. I wasn't even sure I could articulate what I was feeling. I was angry, yes. I was hurt, but above all, I felt lost. My foundation had just cracked wide open, and I had no idea what the ground even looked like anymore. Hours passed. The house was quiet, and I was alone with my thoughts. My phone buzzed a few times with texts from Mom, but I ignored them. She hadn't been there when I needed her, when I needed the truth. Why should I respond now? She'd left me in the dark for too long. It wasn't until the sun began to set that I realized how much time had passed. I'd been lying there for hours, not sleeping, just replaying everything in my mind. I was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't quiet. It felt like I was suffocating in my own thoughts. Then, just as I was about to get up and pace again, there was a knock at my door. I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to face anyone. But after a moment, I heard Linda's voice from the other side. "Katie, please, can we talk? Just, please." I hesitated. I was furious. I didn't want to talk, but a part of me, some small, quiet part, knew that I couldn't avoid this forever. I needed closure. I needed to hear her side of things. With a heavy sigh, I opened the door. She stood there, looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She was holding her hands together in front of her, like she was trying to keep them steady. "I know you're angry," she started, her voice soft. "And I understand why. I never wanted to hurt you. This whole thing, it got complicated and it got out of hand. I didn't know how to explain it." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Then why didn't you? Why didn't you just tell me? I could have handled it, Linda. I would have understood." Linda looked down, as if ashamed of her own silence. "I didn't want to hurt you, Katie. I didn't want you to feel like I was taking something away from you. I've been here for your mom, but I never wanted you to think that I was trying to replace you or push you out." "But you did replace me," I snapped, my frustration bubbling over. "You've been here all the time. You've taken her from me, Linda. And I can't even talk to her anymore because she's so wrapped up in you. She lied to me, and now you're here, acting like everything's fine. How do I even trust either of you anymore?" I saw the pain in Linda's eyes. I didn't care. I was too hurt, too angry to care about her feelings right now. I needed to stand up for myself. I needed to stop being the one who was always overlooked. Linda took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I never wanted to replace you, and I never wanted to hurt you. But I also couldn't keep pretending that I wasn't in love with your mom. I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't know how to keep you from finding out. I didn't want you to hate me." I was silent, trying to absorb her words. I could see the sincerity in her face, but it didn't change how much it had hurt to learn the truth this way. For a long moment, we just stood there, the air thick with unsaid words. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me, and I realized something. I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep letting this tear me apart. I had to decide if I wanted to keep fighting for this relationship with my mom, or if it was too far gone. I looked Linda in the eye, feeling the raw pain still burning in my chest. "I don't know what I want right now. I need space. From you, from Mom, from all of this." Linda nodded slowly. "I understand, and I'll give you that. I'll give you whatever space you need. But please, Katie, don't shut your mom out. She's struggling too. I think you both need each other now more than ever." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever go back to how things were. But at least I had the space to figure it out now. As Linda left my room, I sank down onto the bed again, staring at the wall. The emptiness of the house around me was overwhelming, but it also felt like a blank slate. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild from here. It would take time. It would take a lot of time. But I wasn't going to let this break me. I wasn't going to let their secrets define me. I had to trust myself again. I had to reclaim my life, whatever that looked like now. I didn't know where this would go, but for the first time in days, I felt like I might finally be able to breathe. Story 2. "My wife cheated and stole for her" is the title of this tale. Then, when he conned her, a fair partner attempted to return. My retaliation was ideal. Hello, everyone. I spent a lot of time selecting these tales for you, and the channel has been a little quiet lately. Please click the subscribe button if you like the article. It keeps this adventure going strong and means the world. Together, let's develop. Let's begin the video now. According to the OP, I am a 35-year-old man with 2 wonderful children, Emma, who is 10 years old, and Liam, who is 7. Life appeared to be going well, actually better than good. After more than 10 years together, I believed my wife Amber and I had a solid marriage, and I had my own construction company that I started from the bottom up. I should have noticed the fissures developing when I looked back. Little things were the first, things you would ignore if you weren't listening. Amber was more likely to nod off, affixed to her phone. She then observed, "You look kind of pale," as she glanced at me over her coffee one morning. "How are you feeling?" I dismissed it. Simply put, I was overworked. As I poured myself another cup of coffee, I remarked, as if that would make things better. Trying to balance everything while managing a business and being a father. You know, it wears you down. but I sensed something was wrong. I always felt exhausted, regardless of how much sleep I had or how healthily I attempted to eat. A week later, Amber brought it up once more. "Are you certain that you won't become sick?" As she browsed through her phone, half preoccupied, partly frightened, she inquired. At that point, I gave in and went to the doctor, hoping to receive some vitamins or even a stress reduction talk. Sitting in that antiseptic little room and looking at my doctor when she informed me that I had tested positive for chlamydia was the last thing I anticipated. I initially sat there dumbfounded, trying to take in what she had said. That isn't feasible. I was able to escape. I have been married for more than 10 years. According to her, these infections may continue undiagnosed for a long period. You and your partner will need to talk about this. It seemed like someone had yanked the earth out from under me when I left that office. 11 years of marriage. 11. I'd never even given another lady that kind of glance. How in the world could this have occurred? Amber was enjoying one of her nice iced coffees and browsing through her phone at the kitchen counter when I arrived home. She gave me a nonchalant grin as if nothing had changed when she looked up. For a brief moment, I questioned whether this was all the result of a major error or some strange confusion at the clinic. However, that sensation was short-lived. "Hey," she said, "how did your appointment go?" "All right." I forced myself to sound normal by lying. I was not prepared to speak. Not quite yet. Before I opened that bag of worms, I needed to know the reality if something was happening. In the morning, I had a strategy. If I had learned anything from managing a company, it was to avoid making choices without sufficient information. In order to resolve a complex contract disagreement at work, I contacted Rick, a private investigator I had previously employed. "I need you to investigate a personal matter. It's about my wife," I told him. "Something doesn't add up, and I don't want to draw any judgments too quickly." Rick asked very few questions. "Give me everything you have." "Oh," he said. For the following few days, give me a week, I pretended everything was okay. I assisted the kids with their schoolwork, went to work, and even laughed when Amber told me about her day. But I was a wreck on the inside. I had a knot in my gut every time she smiled at me, like if I were living with a stranger. I wasn't prepared for what Rick had to say when he contacted me a week later. On the other hand, I was. He told me, "You were correct to be skeptical. Your wife has been seeing someone else. A man by the name of Derek." The name was like a kick to the stomach. Derek. All of a sudden, a stranger became the focus of my universe. Rick continued after that. For a few months now, they have been dating. Although it began in the gym, it has now escalated. Dinners, lodging, and even excursions to your family cabin. The cabin where our family was to spend their vacation. It felt like the most betrayal to know that she had taken him to a spot where we had created memories with the children. I hung up after thanking Rick. My hands are trembling. Neither that night nor the following, I confronted Amber. Rather, I concentrated on clearing my mind. This guy had another thing coming if he believed he could just walk into my life and ruin it. And Amber, she didn't know with whom she was playing. I got the information from Rick. Dates, times, and even a few images. Amber wasn't merely having a casual conversation or getting coffee with Derek. Their secret affair was in full swing. However, I maintained my composure rather than confronting Amber. I was wise enough to have a strategy before I blew up. I required further evidence, not only for my own mental health, but also for any future events. Rick went beyond the fundamentals. He researched Derek's past. And this man was a great piece of work, I must say. He wasn't only a fitness instructor who had captured Amber. I am aware of his past, a lengthy one. Derek turned out to be a seasoned con artist. His MO was locating married, wealthy, or both ladies, seducing them and squandering their money. When things became nasty, he had already cheated 2 ladies out of their funds and left town. I felt sick to my stomach. Amber wasn't only unfaithful, they were playing with her. She was completely mistaken if she believed Derek was interested in her for reasons other than money. Additionally, Rick's inquiry revealed something much more concerning. Amber had begun transferring funds from our shared accounts, small quantities initially. Once I wouldn't immediately notice, 100 here, a few hundred there. Then, however, the withdrawals increased. As if she were growing desperate. She had already spent around $50,000. She had even started the process of selling the cabin by forging my signature, as if that wasn't awful enough. For me, that was the final straw. I knew I had to do something. This went beyond simply exposing her falsehoods or catching her in the act. I had to save my future, my company, and my children. I couldn't, however, enter here half-cocked. Derek posed a threat. Amber was obviously not thinking well either. I encouraged Rick to do more research when I phoned him again. Everything I mentioned is what I desire. Every meeting, every text message, every financial transaction, if you can obtain it. Rick made no hesitation. As I waited, he said, "Give me a few days." I did my part. I pretended that nothing was wrong. I went to work, assisted the children with their schoolwork, and even grinned when Amber explained to me why she was staying up late or hanging out with friends on the weekends. It enraged me. But I knew I had to maintain my composure. She would go into damage control mode, and I would lose my opportunity to gain the upper hand if I gave her a hint. Rick had everything I needed when he called me back. With Derek, Amber wasn't just in over her head. She was in a panic. Derek had begun to threaten to reveal their affair if she didn't give him more money. He had enough incriminating texts and pictures to ruin her life if he so desired. She was rushing to maintain his happiness, even if it meant sacrificing everything we had worked so hard to create. Rick and I sat down and I explained my strategy. I said, "We're not just catching them. This is going to end permanently." Rick gave a nod. He said, "You're doing the right thing. However, you must be ready. Things will get messy." Messy wasn't even close to describing it. However, I was prepared. Now that Derek and Amber had made their decisions, it was my turn to do the same. I locked everything down as my first action. Joint bank accounts and frozen documents for the cabin. Flagged the sale and took it out of escrow. My company secured all of its finances and changed all of its passwords. Amber was unaware that any of this was taking place. She didn't notice the walls closing in because she was too preoccupied with skulking around and trying to keep Derek happy. I continued to act foolish. I pretended to be preoccupied with work. Additionally, I deliberately stayed up late, feigning to finish up some paperwork. "Are you all right?" One evening, Amber leaned in the doorway and asked, "You've been under a lot of stress lately." I smiled and shrugged, just trying to stay ahead of things. She nodded, looking almost sympathetic, which made me want to laugh. Here she was, playing house like nothing was wrong while I was quietly dismantling her entire game. But I kept my cool. I knew better than to tip my hand too early. Rick continued giving me updates. Derek, according to habit, was starting to lose patience. He demanded more money and Amber was running out of alternatives. She'd already emptied all she could from our accounts, and now she was looking for personal loans. She was in well over her head, and Derek knew it. "He's becoming careless," Rick warned me during one of our late-night conversations. "He's pushing her harder, but he's also making blunders. We've got enough to take him down anytime you're ready." One night, Amber told me she was meeting up with pals for supper. I knew precisely where she was heading and who she'd be with, owing to Rick's tracking. "Have fun," I murmured, kissing her on the cheek like nothing was wrong. "Don't stay out too late." As soon as she went, I grabbed my keys and walked out. Derek's apartment was a few blocks away, so I parked and waited. When Amber's automobile finally arrived, she got inside. I informed Rick via SMS that they were together. To make the call, I noted down the time. The police had previously been informed by Rick of Derek's blackmail scheme. He had sufficient proof to link Derek to several frauds, not the one with Amber alone. The police arrived in less than an hour. As they dragged Derek out of the apartment in handcuffs, I watched from my car. Amber screamed and tried to explain herself when she emerged just behind him, but the police wouldn't listen. As they carried her into the back of a squad vehicle, she noticed me standing on the sidewalk. "Noah?" Her voice cracked as she screamed. "Why are you here? Assist me!" I shook my head and crossed my arms. "You subjected yourself to this?" I said, "Your decisions were your own." She had a shocked and terrified expression on her face. The police shut the door, interrupting her as she attempted to continue yelling. For a little while I watched as the squad vehicles departed. It was an odd sensation, alleviation to some extent, a little depressed. This wasn't a triumph and I wasn't rejoicing, but it was justice. The fallout was swift. After Derek's past was revealed, Amber's arrest made headlines throughout the area. People enjoy a good scandal, and this one was as nasty as they come. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Equipped with all the proof Rick has collected, the court made no hesitation at all. They ordered Amber to return all of the money she had stolen, awarded me complete custody of Emma and Liam, and gave me authority over all of our joint assets. Derek. He faced severe jail time for identity theft, fraud, and blackmail. It was a sense of finality to have his mugshot displayed everywhere. Nobody else's life was going to be ruined by him anytime soon. I sat down with Emma and Liam that evening and told them the truth. That is the kid-friendly version. I wasn't going to lie, but I also didn't want them to despise their mother. I informed them that things will be different from here on. However, we will be all right, I swear. Liam got onto my lap after they both nodded. He encircled me with his little arms. He added, his voice muffled against my shirt, "We're a team." The days after Amber's arrest were, to put it mildly, tumultuous. I hardly had time to recover from the divorce, police interviews, and attempting to maintain the normalcy of my children's life. But to be honest, having control over the issue at last was a relief. Amber and Derek's plans were falling apart, and the falsehoods were in the open. I wish I could say that Amber handled things well, but that's not how it happened. She began phoning me constantly from prison, pleading for my pardon and claiming that everything had been misunderstood. Derek tricked me. She would weep. I was clueless about what I was doing. Noah, please. As the children adapted, consider them. Amber's legal issues continued to accumulate. The police had a ton of evidence against Derek and Amber because of Rick's exhaustive investigation, including hotel receipts, bank records, and even some unflattering text messages. The bargain was cemented by Derek's attempts at blackmail. He faced years in prison after being charged with several offenses, including extortion and fraud. Amber, S circumstances weren't any better. Her role in the conspiracy, especially the money theft and forgeries, didn't look well in court, even though she wasn't charged with the same serious crimes as Derek. It also didn't assist her argument that I filed for divorce. The court decided completely in my favor based on Rick's evidence. The day the divorce was completed, she was given full custody of the children, authority over all marital property, and a sizable restitution order for the money she had stolen. I had an odd spectrum of feelings, mostly relief, but a persistent sense of regret for what could have been. Together, Amber and I had created a life, or I believed that we had. It was more difficult than I thought to let go of that dream. Amber wasn't happy with the court's ruling, despite everything she had done. She appeared at the house without warning a week after the decision, looking very different from who she used to be. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her hair was disheveled, and she clutched a folder of documents as if it were her lifeline. "Please, Noah." Her voice broke as she said, "I apologize for my error. I don't know how to make up for my foolishness and selfishness, but I want to try. Let me come home, please." I tried to feel anything as I looked at her. Fury? I feel sorry. Anything, but I was just exhausted. "Amber, it's too late." Silently, I said, "You did more than simply injure me. Liam and Emma were harmed by you. For a guy who didn't even give a damn about you, you risked their lives. From there's no turning back." Her mouth quivered, and I briefly believed she may protest. Rather, she simply nodded. She was crying uncontrollably. "I'll reimburse you," she muttered. "Each and every dime, I swear. You and the court are now at odds about it." I retreated inside and stated that, "Amber, goodbye." I felt a burden leave my shoulders as I shut the door. I didn't feel like I was drowning for the first time in months. At last the turmoil had subsided, allowing me to concentrate on the important things. Our future and my children. Life established a rhythm as the dust cleared. However, that was not the life I had imagined. I was left to pick up the pieces for Emma, Liam, and myself, after Amber's decisions destroyed the idea of stability I had previously held onto. Slowly but surely, the children and I were getting better. Amber, however, continued to make an effort to reintegrate into our life. Her calls resumed, progressing from heartfelt voicemails to outright threats. "You're mistaken if you believe you can keep the kids away from me." In one really unpleasant note, she shouted, "Noah, they are also my children. That may have been the case. Biologic." But the instant Amber put Derek above her family, she had given up on ever being a true parent. For good cause, the court had already decided against her. She was unsuitable due to her financial dishonesty, negligence, and complete lack of accountability. However, Amber wasn't going to accept no because she was Amber. There was a hammering at the front door one Friday night when Emma and Liam and I were watching a movie. I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't a neighbor. I knew that, Dot. She was there when I opened the door. Amber's hair was unkempt as she stood on the porch. Her makeup looked as if she had been drinking or weeping. Noah opened the door for me. She tried to shove past me with a slur. "I must see my children. They're in bed." I stood my ground and lied. "You must go." A grimace distorted her features. "I can't be denied them, Dot. Their mother is me. You are the lady who attempted to finance her affair by selling the house they grew up in." I retorted in a chilly, quiet voice. "They and I were both robbed by you. Therefore, stop pretending to care about anyone but yourself." Amber's face changed, her inebriated bluster momentarily weakening. Then, as if on cue, she began to cry and leaned against the doorframe while the tears spilled. Dot. She cried, "I made mistakes, Noah. But you are loved by me. I cherish us. Let me come home, please. This is something we can resolve." It was there. She had been running the same deceptive ploy for months, weaseling her way back in by relying on my sympathies. This time, though, I wasn't going to fall for it, not with all that she had done. "You don't love me, Amber," I remarked, taking a step back and dragging the door along with me. "I gave you a life that you adore, the security, the comfort, and the money. However, you discarded all of that. You're reaping the consequences of your actions now." In a moment, her tears became rage. "Do you believe that you are superior to me?" She slammed her fist on the door and yelled, "Without me? You are nothing, Dot, without me. You wouldn't even have this house or this existence. Before I contact the police, leave my property." My voice was deadly calm as I spoke. "This is your final caution." She took a backward stumble. She had a look of despair mixed with anger. "Noah, you're going to regret this," she gave a hiss. "Take note of what I say." I murmured, "Good night, Amber," and slammed the door behind her. I held back from breathing until I heard her car start and pull away. I told Emma and Liam about the issue the next morning. "Your mother visited yesterday night," I said softly. "I told her it wasn't a good time, but she still wanted to see you. Is she all right?" Emma frowned as she asked. After some hesitation, I felt it was better to be honest. Dot. "She is now having difficulties." I said, "It will take her some time to come to terms with the poor decisions she made. However, we will be all right. Remember, we're strong." Emma gave a nod. She pursed her lips. She said, "We don't need her. She simply exacerbates the situation." She was unaware of the depth of her words. I didn't argue, though Liam, on the other hand, didn't inquire about Amber. Clutching his plush dinosaur as if nothing had occurred, he just crawled into my lap. Over the next 2 weeks, Amber attempted a few more antics. Mailing letters full of fictitious promises and apologies, as well as attending Liam's soccer game without permission. She wasn't going to keep it. Every time I silence her. I had been cleaning up her mess for years, expecting she would change and covering up her falsehoods. However, I was finished. I was rebuilding my life, and she didn't deserve another chance to ruin it. Her attempts eventually stalled. Whether she moved on to her next victim or became weary of being ignored, I didn't give a damn. My main priorities were making sure Emma and Liam knew they were loved and providing them with the stability they needed. Amber faded into the background, a phantom of the life we had abandoned. I also refused to let the wounds from her treachery to define me or my children, even though I would always bear them. Update. Reddit, I'm here with another update since Amber has once again surpassed herself. Since the Derek incident, life has been going well for me and the kids. Emma is doing really well as a soccer player. We've created a stable and peaceful life together, and Liam is still my little Lego architect. Naturally, Amber can't allow us to have it without making one final embarrassing comeback attempt. Amber unexpectedly hired a lawyer and submitted a request to change custody. Why? Because all of a sudden she decided she was rehabilitated and wanted to be a mother once more. Because of her criminal background, the court roasted her. Hi there. Theft, forgery, and Rick's proof of her dubious financial dealings. There was no possibility for her. The petition was rejected. The game is done. Amber attempted a couple surprise visits to give the impression that she cared before that custody ploy was foiled. She was shouting from the sidelines like she was team mom or something when she once showed up to Liam's soccer game without being asked. "Who is this lady?" asked the other parents. Liam hardly gave her a glance. She attempted to guilt-trip Emma once more after school by cornering her and making vows to make amends while crying. Emma calmed her down expertly, urged her to quit lying, and turned to go. What a rock star the child is. Amber chose to play the sympathy card following the custody refusal. She began phoning me often and left crazy voicemails in which she bemoaned her sins and urged us to pardon her for the sake of the children. The icing on the cake was when she demanded to see the kids one evening on my porch. After screaming that I was turning them against her, she broke down in tears and said that she missed our family. Before I phoned the police, I urged her to go out. She didn't attempt that trick again after that. The children and I, meantime, are doing better than ever. The house has become our home. The kids saved money for a trampoline, fresh paint, and new furnishings. Our golden retriever, Max, keeps us all occupied and content. Emma's dominating soccer competitions. Liam is creating fantastical Lego universes. And next summer, we're organizing a large excursion to the Grand Canyon. It feels like life is finally ours, lighter and more peaceful. Amber. And now she's a faraway memory. I'm not going to push it, and the kids hardly talk about her. If she hopes to become a mother in the future, she must demonstrate it, not only with words but also with deeds. She has only demonstrated her ability to make poor choices thus far. That's where we are anyhow. Amber may continue to spin out of control, but the kids and I are moving on. One soccer goal, one Lego tower, one step at a time. Update the second : Reddit, hello. Although life has been fantastic for me and the kids in the months since my previous post, Amber's antics haven't entirely subsided. However, I will address it. Suddenly, Amber reappeared, attempting a different approach. She made direct contact with me. She made a huge error and says she changed after going to a dubious-sounding therapeutic camp. She stated that she wished to start again as a co-parent and make apologies. If she had not immediately followed up with a request for money, this may have been nearly plausible. Indeed, cash. Her justification. In order to properly support the children, she wanted to get back on her feet. Yes, Amber, I didn't participate. My attorney did. Amber attempted to request another custody adjustment, arguing that she was entitled to partial custody because she had changed. Her proposal? Numerous questionable character allusions from folks who most likely were unaware of the entire plot. Amber's case was quickly resolved because to my lawyer, Rick's strong evidence and Amber's criminal history. The court refused to accept it. The judge cut her off once more, stressing that the children needed stability, which Amber has repeatedly shown she is unable to deliver. It gets considerably messier from here. Amber seemed to have reverted to her previous behavior. Rick? Yes, he remains my preferred PI. Discovered that she is seeing another dubious person. This time, it's a prospective business owner who has already faced 2 fraud lawsuits. It appears that Amber has a kind. It's obvious that she's still pursuing the same poisonous cycle that led to her problems in the first place, even though this doesn't directly affect me or the kids. Everything is being handled expertly by Emma and Liam. Amber has made many attempts to get in touch. Letters, sporadic posts on social media, and even a birthday card with cash that Liam handed to me right away and said he didn't want it. Emma makes it obvious that she doesn't trust her mother and is particularly protective of Liam. You only care when it's convenient for you, my 12-year-old stated, glaring at Amber the last time she attempted to guilt-trip Emma. I've never felt more proud. I've formally moved on with the kids. Our home has been transformed into a veritable haven. Emma decided to paint her room a different hue, naturally purple. A theme park has also been added to Liam's Lego business. The kids adore the Sunday treks we've established as a family ritual with Max. We're currently organizing our vacation to the Grand Canyon for next summer, and I'm also working on surprise them with Disneyland tickets. The impact of Amber has faded to the background. We don't mind when she sometimes shows up with her drama. Giving my children the life they deserve, one free from deceit, mayhem, and treachery, is my top priority. Therefore, keep this in mind if you're in a similar circumstance. Although you have no influence over other people's decisions, you do have power over how you react to them. For me, that meant deciding to provide my children calm, security, and unwavering love. We quote, recreating something tangible that Amber won't ever touch again, yet she may continue to spiral. I appreciate your support along this trip. Reddit. Cheers to better times to come. Story 3. My wife cheated with her boss and my daughters helped hide it, is the title of this story. I thereby exacted my nuclear retribution. Hello everyone. Finding these articles for you takes a lot of my time. Please click the subscribe button if you like the article. It keeps this adventure going strong and means the world. Together, let's develop. Let's begin the video now. I quote him, not even sure why I'm writing this. The original poster states at the beginning, to vent perhaps, to get it off my chest perhaps, perhaps to make sense of everything. Since I can hardly hold my life together at the moment, it feels like everything has been torn to pieces. Even if they are complete strangers on the internet, I simply must tell someone. I believed for over 30 years that I had the type of life that most people only dream about. Jane and I were young when we got married. She was 20 years old. I was 22. Even though we were quite poor at the time, we were content. We started a new life together. Brought up Alice and Maddie, 2 daughters. To me, they were everything. My excitement and pride. My oldest Alice is 26. She finished first in her college class, was always the overachiever valedictorian in high school, and is marrying her longtime partner this fall. My youngest, Maddie, is 24 years old. The more carefree one has always been her. She has been very close to me since she was a little child, is nice, and never fails to grin. I had always believed that I got along well with both of them. I had a lovely marriage with Jane. That's what I believed anyhow. Yes, we had highs and lows. Like other couples, they had financial difficulties while their children were little. Occasionally there are arguments, health frights, but we remained united throughout it all. We seemed like a team to me. I genuinely thought we would age together, that we would be the elderly couple, laughing on the porch about our wild childhood. I had the utmost love for her. Everything fell apart a week ago. It was an ordinary work day. Jane informed me that Alice and Maddie would be joining her for supper. Every several weeks, they essentially do this. They refer to it as girls' dinner. They can catch up, joke, and discuss topics they don't want to discuss with me. I didn't mind. Actually, I cherished their closeness. I felt like I had done something right as a husband and parent, raising a family that cherished one another. Jane was upstairs getting ready that night. In the kitchen, I was drinking coffee and looking at my phone's news feed. I can still clearly recall it. On the counter, her phone buzzed. It was not out of the ordinary. I picked it up because she receives texts from the ladies all the time, especially when they're making arrangements without thinking. What I did next is not something I'm proud of. For some reason, I opened the mail even though I had no reason to be suspicious. An unsaved number was the source. I'm excited to meet you this evening. I went cold. Confusion was my initial response. This isn't possible. It must have been an error. Or perhaps it wasn't what it appeared to be. For what seemed like an eternity, I gazed at the message. My thoughts are racing. In order to view the remainder of the chat, I finally touched on the thread. I was destroyed by what I discovered. The messages didn't have to be lengthy, but they weren't either. I could tell exactly what was happening from them. Her supervisor was the source of the texts. It was clear that the meal they were having was not a business gathering. The communications had a flirtatious, loving tone. Earlier that week, there were texts. You are missed. Once a week is insufficient. Jane had answered, I also miss you. I felt sick to my stomach. My heart began to race. I nearly dropped the phone because my hands were trembling so violently. My wife was this, my spouse, the lady with whom I had constructed my life, my children's mother. She was cheating. I had no idea what to do. There was a part of me that wanted to go straight upstairs and face her. However, I was unable to. I was attempting to take in what I had just witnessed while in astonishment. I required further details. I had to know for certain. Jane arrived downstairs a few minutes later. She was dressed up and looked stunning as usual. She added, "Don't wait up, okay?" and gave me a smile and a cheek kiss. Her tone was friendly and informal, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I'm not sure how I did it, but I was able to speak. Enjoy yourself with the females. I took her phone and activated location sharing as soon as she left the house. That was something I had never done before. I had no desire to snoop on her or anybody else. But I didn't care at the time. I had to be told the truth. I waited for her location to update, and when it did, I sat there looking at my own phone. I felt my heart sink even further. She wasn't going to the restaurant where she typically met the girlfriends. She was heading to another location, one that our family had visited several times. I texted Maddie and Allison. "When are you having supper with your mother?" They both answered almost at once. 7 o'clock, Alice said. "I'm eager to see her." Maddie made a similar statement. They were telling lies. I was being deceived by my own daughters. It seemed unbelievable to me. Even though I didn't want to accept it, I realized then that Jane wasn't the only person who had betrayed me. My girls also participated. I watched Jane's whereabouts for a short while longer. She reached the eatery. With my pulse racing the entire way, I snatched up my vehicle keys and drove there. I parked outside and peered through the window when I arrived. Finding her didn't take long. She and her employer were seated at a table close to the rear. They had no idea that I was observing them. They were laughing and holding hands. In my chest, it was like a knife. Taking out my phone, I took a photo of them. I have no idea why I did that. Perhaps to convince myself that I wasn't dreaming and that it was real. After that, I drove off while sitting in my car and looking at the photo of my wife with another man. I was overcome with feelings of loss, rage, and incredulity. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea how to confront her or face her. So I didn't. Not quite yet. Rather, I emailed the photo by opening our family group chat. Only the image with a little description. For a period. "I'm glad you're having fun at the girls' supper." After shutting off my phone, I took a car to my brother's residence. Even though I didn't want to, I was unable to handle the aftermath. I wasn't prepared. In my brother's guest room that night, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my life had come apart so fast. I had always considered myself to be a decent father and spouse. I wasn't so sure now, though. I felt as though everything I believed to be true about my life, marriage, and family was false. That night, I didn't go home. I was unable to. I drove around in circles for a long until I eventually pulled into my brother's driveway after sending that picture in the family group chat and shutting off my phone. He allowed me in without asking many questions, even though it was late, but he knew something wasn't right. I suppose my visage was a living testament to that. At the time, I didn't give him the whole story. I just stated that I needed a place to spend the night. I wasn't in the mood for a drink, but he offered one. All I wanted was solitude. I couldn't sleep and spent the night on his couch looking at the ceiling. As I tried to take in all that had transpired over the last few hours, my mind was racing. I kept playing again the scene in the restaurant where I saw them together. Jane's employer smiled at her, the way they held hands like two adolescent lovers, leaning very close to one another. I felt ill from it. What was the duration of this? What had caused my blindness? Then there were Maddie and Alice. The way they nonchalantly lied to me as if it didn't matter. To tell the truth, I reared them, to be honest. Here they were, however, assisting their mother in concealing an affair. On an entirely new level, it seemed like a betrayal. When I eventually put my phone back on the next morning, it was instantly filled with voicemails, missed calls, texts, and notifications. I had received dozens of calls from Jane. I had also received texts from Alice and Maddie. I skipped through since I lacked the stamina to read it all at once. I anticipated Jane's messages. "Give me a call, please. I know how to describe it. It isn't what you believe. We must speak." Her voicemails went unheard. I was unable to listen to her voice. I was aware that it would just increase my anger. Maddie's words struck a different chord. She apologized excessively and sent me wall after wall of texts. "I'm very sorry, Dad. I should never have told you lies. I despise myself for my actions. Don't hate me, please. Could we please have a conversation? I'm terrified. Everything is damaged by me." She even texted me with her boyfriend. "Hello, this is Josh. Maddie is experiencing a panic attack and is quite disturbed. She "s afraid. It's impossible to forgive her. Give her a call, please." I also didn't respond to her. I was at a loss for words. Alice, however, was another matter. She sent a brief, icy text. I'm sad you learned this way, Dad, but I believe you're going overboard. Don't let one mistake ruin a wonderful marriage. Are you overreacting? One error. It made my blood boil. This wasn't only an error. This was blatant treachery. Not just Jane, but Alice and Maddie as well. They misled me. Our family was utterly destroyed, and they assisted their mother in hiding something from us. Every time I inquired about their intentions, I couldn't help but imagine how many times they must have lied to me. And although they were well aware of Jane's true intentions, they told me they were going to dinner. Every time they grinned at me, they pretended that nothing was wrong, while keeping the truth hidden. I stewed in my own rage and heartache for the majority of the day. I wasn't ready to open up when my brother wanted to talk to me. I needed time to think things out. I realized by the afternoon that I had to say something about this. I began by sending Maddie a text. It was brief, for a period. I love you, Maddie, but I'm really upset by what you did. I need time to think things out. She answered almost immediately. I'm very sorry, Father. For this, I will never be able to forgive myself. You have my undying love. I didn't answer. I then sent Alice an SMS for a period. Alice, this isn't an error. The entire family has been betrayed by this. Please wait till I'm ready to speak before getting in touch with me. Although she didn't respond, Jane immediately began messaging me again, so I know she must have showed her. Don't vent your frustration on the females. All they wanted to do was keep me safe. They have no intention of hurting you. I paid her no attention. Excuses didn't interest me. I eventually told my brother the whole tale later that night. I showed him the picture and the messages. He was incensed for me. He advised you to chop them all off. You are obviously not respected by them. Why should you continue to live with them? I knew in my heart that he was correct. Therefore, his comments really got to me. But I wasn't sure I could take the step of cutting off my girls. I began considering the next course of action that evening. I was aware that Jane and I were no longer married. There was no way out of this. I had no desire to attempt. However, what about Maddie and Alice? Would I ever be able to trust them? Would I ever have the same perspective on them? Are you aware of what they did? I determined that I needed time. It's time to reflect. It's processing time. It's time to decide how to proceed. However, one thing was for sure. It was the end of my life as I knew it. The impact of the fallout was not sudden. The burn was gradual and oppressive. I was no longer furious by the time I returned to my brother's house that night. I felt numb. A dull, crushing weight had replaced all of the emotions I had previously experienced, including anger, bewilderment, and sadness. It resembled the life I had created. The one I believed to be really sturdy was disintegrating. I was just able to observe. When I switched on my phone, the first thing I noticed was the stillness. For all of the calls and alerts that were missed earlier in the day, nothing was new now. No more of Maddie's desperate texts. There was no follow-up from Alice. Jane did not leave voicemails. They seemed to give up after realizing I wouldn't reply. Or perhaps they were reassembling. Who knows? In any case, the silence was disturbing. It wasn't a good thing that I had time to contemplate because of the stillness. The hurt was all that remained when the rage had subsided. The questions continued to whirl like a whirlwind within my mind. What was the duration of this? Jane had lied to my face how many times? Did Alice's and Maddie's actions ever make them feel bad? Did they betray their father in order to protect their mother? Or was this all simply usual for them? That evening, I got down with my brother and explained everything to him. While I was speaking, he remained silent. Simply listen. I informed him that I had discovered the texts on Jane's phone, Alice's and Maddie's falsehoods, the family group chat bomb I planted before I vanished, and the photo I snapped of Jane with her employer at the restaurant. He shook his head and reclined back in his chair after I was done. He remarked, "That's messed up. I'm not even sure where to begin. Jane always seemed a bit, too polished to me. However, I didn't anticipate her doing this. I'm not sure, Guy, about the chicks. It's just that it's low." To make sure I wasn't going crazy or exaggerating, it was comforting to hear someone else say it out. However, that didn't make things any simpler. My brother's rage on my behalf was helpful at the time. In actuality, though, I didn't require his rage. I had a lot of them. I required direction and clarity. I didn't have any. I made the decision to quit moping and get something done the next morning. Organizing my funds was the first step. If I didn't first defend myself, I couldn't consider the emotional side of things. I moved money into a different account and canceled joint accounts for the most of the day. Anything that may be in danger during the divorce was locked down and out of Jane's reach. I refused to allow her take advantage of my sorrow to surprise me, but Jane wasn't the only one. I kept thinking about all the money I had spent or intended to spend on Alice's wedding while I went through my accounts. They lost tens of thousands of dollars, all for a girl who had helped her mother deceive me, who had lied to me while looking me in the eye. I felt nauseous at the prospect. I mentally noted that I should discuss it with my lawyer. By the afternoon, I was absolutely not going to pay another dime, even if I couldn't get that money back. I was prepared to go forward. I gave a lawyer a call, actually a number of attorneys. I spent the remainder of the day sitting in offices explaining the tale to strangers who were obviously assessing the situation while trying very hard to seem professional, since my brother had suggested that I meet with a few before selecting one. I had chosen someone by the end of the day. She was intelligent, tough, and most of all, aggressive. I informed her that although I wanted this to be as quick and clean as possible, I also wanted to make sure Jane didn't take anything that wasn't rightfully hers. The attorney comforted me by stating that she has experience with many instances similar to this one. Although I didn't feel any better after that, I did feel that I was in capable hands. Sitting by myself in my brother's guest room that evening, I began to consider what I would like to say to Jane. So far, I hadn't approached her. I had been dreading it, in part because I didn't think I could remain composed. Additionally, I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of having to defend herself. What on earth could she say to make any of this acceptable? However, I knew I couldn't stay away from her forever. I'd have to confront her at some time, and I wanted to be prepared when I did. I didn't want to fall for her tears or her justifications. I had to remind myself why I was doing this in order to maintain my focus. I put all I wanted to express in writing, all the things I wanted to ask, what I wanted to say, everything. I wasn't sure if I would really utilize it. However, putting it in writing was beneficial. I felt somewhat in control of it, as if I weren't really a victim in this whole situation. But thinking about Alice and Maddie was the most difficult part. Since sending those texts, I hadn't communicated with them, and I wasn't sure if I could. After discovering that your daughters have been deceiving you for months, how do you approach them? How can you even start to regain that confidence? Maddie apologized, and I wanted to think she meant it. That she really apologized for her actions. However, how could I believe that? After what I found out, how could I believe anything she said? Alice as well. Her icy, contemptuous reaction had broken my heart. Although I've always known she was closer to Jane, I never imagined she would support her mother in such a situation. She seemed to have made up her mind, and I wasn't the one. I made another choice that evening. If they wanted to correct this, I wasn't going to get in touch with them. They would need to approach me. I had no intention of pursuing them, pleading for their pardon or explanations. They would now have to deal with the repercussions of their decisions. I had a peculiar sensation of serenity as I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling once more. For the first time since the affair was found out. Not that I felt totally lost. I had a strategy. It wouldn't solve everything, and it wasn't much. However, it was a beginning. I had had enough of being the victim. I was going to be in charge from now on. I thought it was time to confront Jane after spending 2 days avoiding calls and processing my feelings while sitting in my brother's guest room. There was nothing to be gained by avoiding her. I also needed to mention a few things. She needed to hear certain things. Late that evening, I sent her a text. "We must speak at 10 a.m. tomorrow at home." She answered very instantly. "I'll be present. Let me explain, please. Describe." What was there to clarify? Excuses and flimsy explanations didn't interest me, but I didn't respond. I decided to reserve it until our in-person meeting. I drove to our place early the next morning. I felt a rush of bitterness and nostalgia as soon as I went through the door. We lived here, the location where we established our lives, reared our children, and commemorated holidays, anniversaries, and birthdays. It felt hollow now, as if all the positive things that had occurred here were corrupted. Jane arrived on schedule. She entered trembling. As if she had been sobbing for days, her eyes were swollen and red. In one hand, she held her phone as if it were a shield. In addition, I saw that she had taken off her wedding band. That particular detail hurt more than it ought to have. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet." Standing just inside the door as if she were scared to approach, she spoke gently. I said, "Don't thank me." I was surprised by how chilly my voice sounded. "Making things easy for you is not my purpose." The tone of the discourse was established by that. We took a seat at the table in the dining room. We had sat at the same table for innumerable family meals. She immediately began to speak, stating all I had anticipated. It wasn't serious. It had no significance. It was an error. She repeated herself over and over, riding along the same weary lines, as if they would become credible if she spoke them often enough. "Give up," I remarked, interrupting her at last. "Answers are what I want, not excuses." She gave me a perplexed expression. "How long do you mean?" I inquired. She paused. "A few of months. Give it another go." She muttered, her face crushed. "Nearly a year." I tried to control my rage by clenching my hand beneath the table. 1 year. A whole year of deception. She had smiled at me how many times? Gave me a kiss. Declared her love for me, while moving stealthily behind my back. What about the girls? "How long have they known?" I inquired. Jane flinched. Her gaze flitted away. "Not all the time. A few months back," I told them. "I didn't want to involve them, however. I cut you off, though. You incorporated them into your life. Are you aware of what it has done to me?" She began to cry, then sobbed uncontrollably. "All of this was not my intention. I was really upset, but I didn't want to hurt you. I lost my temper. The home was deserted when I spoke. You chose to blow apart our family because you were unhappy. You weren't happy. You brought our girls into your turmoil and cheated on me." "Jane, do you realize what you've done?" She didn't respond. She simply sobbed into her hands while sitting there. And I didn't feel sorry for her for the first time. "Everything is damaged by you." Silently, I said, "I have relationships with Alice and Maddie in addition to our marriage. After this, how can I possibly trust them? How can I look at them without seeing this betrayal? I wanted them to tell you the truth." She muttered, "None of this was what I wanted. What made you do it then? If you were so unhappy, why didn't you come to me?" I said. "Instead of skulking about behind my back, why didn't you try to make things right?" She had nothing to say, or perhaps she did, but it made no difference. Her actions would not be altered by anything she said. There was a lengthy pause, and then I got up. I quote, "Am going to file for divorce." "You'll hear from my lawyer shortly," I added. "Don't do this, please." She stood up as well and pleaded, "This is something we can resolve. We are able to repair it. Nothing needs to be fixed." I said, "You made a decision. I'm currently creating my..." I turned to her one final time before leaving. "Don't expect me to cover Alice's wedding anymore, by the way. She can request that her boss pay for it, because both of you are quite adept at maintaining secrets." I left before she could respond, but her face collapsed once again. I stopped in the hallway on my way out of the house to look at the family pictures that were up on the wall. We were there. Jane, Alice, Maddie, and I all smiled like the ideal family. I adored those pictures once. They felt like a nasty joke now. I shattered the closest one, a photo of Alice and I during her high school graduation, against the wall. For an instant, I felt a glimmer of satisfaction when the glass broke. However, it was short-lived. I came to a realization while I was making my way to my car. This was only the start. The actual combat had just begun, but the altercation with Jane was done. Alice and Maddie were still a problem for me. I still needed to decide how to proceed. Additionally, I still had to deal with the fact that the life I had spent almost 30 years creating was no longer there. The altercation with Jane was only the beginning. The air became clear. Yes, however, it did not simplify matters. If anything, it gave the betrayal a more tangible, weighty sense. Though it was concentrated, my rage at Jane was piercing. I was leaving because I knew what she had done. It was more hazy with Alice and Maddie. They were my biological children, my daughters. However, they had selected her. I informed Jane that I was going to file for divorce the following day. I chose to have separate meetings with Alice and Maddie. I was not prepared to shut them off entirely without at least hearing their perspective, and I couldn't ignore them indefinitely. However, I was also aware that this would not be a friendly conversation. I needed to know whether there was anything left to salvage because our trust had been destroyed. I began by talking to Maddie. The more sentimental one had always been her. Additionally, she has been sending almost frantic SMS over the last 3 days. At a park close to my brother's house, I asked her to meet me. She appeared to have not slept for days when she got there. She continued to fidget with her hands, and her eyes were swollen and red. She began to weep as soon as we took a seat on a bench. "I'm very sorry, Dad." Her voice cracked as she said, "I was at a loss for words. I didn't intend to do you harm. So why did you tell me a lie?" I asked in a forceful but composed tone. "You covered for your mother, but why? Did you really think I wouldn't know?" She wiped her tears and shook her head. "That wasn't the case. A few months back, she informed me about it. Despite my anger, she pleaded with me to be quiet. She said it was only a phase and that she would soon put a stop to it. I had no idea what to do. I gazed at her, attempting to comprehend what she had said. "So you chose to keep her safe rather than be honest with me?" I was expecting her to quit. Maddie's voice was hardly audible above a whisper. If she had a chance to make things right, I didn't want to ruin the family. I had no idea it would get this far. I responded, "That's not good enough, Maddie. You cannot claim ignorance as a justification for your actions. She was cheating and you knew it. You cooperated even though you knew she was lying to me. How does it make me feel, do you know?" She covered her face with her hands as she sobbed once again. Watching her cry made me feel guilty, but I refused to allow it, make me weaker. The affair was no longer the only issue. It had to do with the harm they had all done to my confidence. Finally, I added, "I'm not saying this to punish you. However, I want you to know how much this has upset me. I'm not sure if I can trust you right now. I'm not sure whether I will ever be able to trust you as much as I once did." With trembling shoulders, Maddie nodded. "Dad, I'll stop at nothing to make this right. Anything. Tell me what to do, please." I had nothing to say to her. I departed after telling her I needed some time. It was quite another matter when I met Alice. I thought it would be best to have a conversation in a neutral setting, so I asked her to meet me at a coffee shop. She arrived 10 minutes late, yet she appeared calm and put together as like nothing had occurred. I was offended by that alone. As she sat down, she murmured, "Thanks for meeting me." I wasted no time at all. "What kept you from telling me about your mother's affair, Alice?" She leaned back in her chair and moaned. "I did not wish to become engaged, Dad. Mom and you have to talk about it. I decided it would be best to avoid it. Get involved." I said it again, raising my voice. "Alice, you didn't keep out of it. You misled me. You took her place. Staying out of it is not that. Choosing a side is what that is." She responded defensively. "I wasn't picking sides. I was attempting to maintain harmony. I didn't want to exacerbate the situation." "For whom is it worse?" I inquired. "For myself? For your mom?" She didn't respond. This provided me with all the information I required. "You're a grown-up, Alice," I said. "You're about to tie the knot. Would you want everyone to lie and shield your fiancé if he did to you what your mother did to me? Or would you rather that someone speak out and be honest with you?" "That's not the same." With a frustrated expression, she said. "Mom did something wrong. It does not imply that you must discard everything." Her remarks were like a kick to the face. "An error." "Do you believe this to be that?" "It's an error," she stated firmly. "Dad, people make errors. One poor decision does not mean that everything must be destroyed. One poor decision." I shook my head and repeated, "Are you even able to hear yourself? This was a wise decision. Maddie, you and your mother all betrayed you. While you sit here, you pretend as though I'm exaggerating. That's not what I'm saying." "Quickly," she said. "You're just being too harsh in my opinion. You're in pain. You'll eventually regret cutting us off, but I understand that. Your family is us." I said, "Families don't lie to each other. Family cannot make up for someone who is destroying everything. Maddie and you didn't just tell me lies. You betrayed my confidence, and I don't see how I can go over it at the moment." She appeared irritated as she crossed her arms. "What the heck? Are you just going to reject us? Act as though we don't exist?" I acknowledged that I didn't know, but I can't act as though nothing occurred. I can't act as though you didn't turn on me. Before I eventually got up, we sat in quiet for a few minutes. "What I needed to say has been spoken. The rest is up to you," I informed her. She made no attempt to stop me. I pondered both discussions as I sat by myself in my brother's guest room before leaving that evening. Even though Maddie appeared sincere in her regrets, I wasn't sure whether I could ever forgive her completely. Alice, however, was another matter. It was obvious that she didn't believe she was at fault, since she refused to accept the gravity of what she had done. I thought of removing them both from my life for the first time. I didn't want to make the choice, but it seemed hopeless to try to mend ties with those who had so severely wronged me. That evening, I made up my mind. The next morning, I gave my lawyer a call and instructed her to update my will. Maddie and Alice were to no longer be considered beneficiaries. Everything, my retirement reserve, my savings, my sister and her children would inherit the house. I knew they wouldn't betray me as my own girls did, and they had always supported me. When I informed my brother, he made no attempt to dissuade me. He responded, "You're doing the right thing. They made their decisions. They may now accept the repercussions." The consequences were immediate. The next day, Maddie called me in tears. "Don't do this, Dad," she urged. "I adore you, even though I know I made a mistake. The money doesn't matter to me. All I want is to keep you around." I was surprised by how hard her remarks hurt me, but I refused to back down. "Maddie, I promise to always adore you. However, love does not allow me to forget what you did. I require time. Perhaps we can mend our connection in the future. However, I am unable to have you in my life at this time." She hung up after weeping for a while. As expected, Alice adopted a different strategy. She accused me of being vengeful and petty in a lengthy email. She said that I was wrecking her wedding since it had nothing to do with her, and that I was punishing her for attempting to maintain harmony. I didn't answer. There was no purpose. Jane also attempted to step in. She emailed me. She spoke in a refined, well-crafted tone. She pleaded with me not to separate the girls against her will, saying it wasn't only to punish them for her own transgressions. She even dared to say that the family would suffer irreversible harm if they were removed. I also didn't respond to her. I began to feel lighter as the days passed. The weight of the betrayal no longer seemed as oppressive, but the fury was still there. Although it was difficult, severing relationships was essential. I had to safeguard myself emotionally as well as financially. It felt like I could breathe again for the first time in weeks. I've been cutting them out of my will for a month now. Since then, neither Alice nor Maddie have talked to me. According to our common acquaintances, Alice is frantically trying to locate the money to pay for the wedding costs that I had been covering. I have no sympathy for her. When she decided to support her mother, she made her decision. I still think about you, Maddie. A part of me wishes we could get back together eventually, but only if she realizes how deeply she betrayed me. I quote Mem, concentrating on myself till then. Jane, I don't care about her anymore. What she does and who she does it with don't matter to me. My attorney tells me that she won't receive much as the divorce proceedings go. For me, that's sufficient. I occasionally question whether I made the correct decision, removing them from my life. However, I then remind myself of one basic reality. They made their decisions. I'm building mine now. At last, I'm free.